In a world that rewards velocity and noise, Edward Hopper teaches us how to look slowly and quietly. His paintings hold still long enough for the noise to drain away. What remains is light, geometry, color, and a handful of people who seem to live at a slightly different tempo than the world around them. His work teaches us to slow down, to notice small intervals of quiet in a world that keeps speeding up. Hopper painted big city nights, empty streets, anonymous rooms, and the hush just before or after movement. His paintings feel like pauses in a loud soundtrack. By the end of this video, you'll recognize the visual vocabulary Hopper used to make the quiet visible, and you'll see how the same patterns of urban solitude echo in our lives today. You'll also see connections between artists of different media. I've seen many references to loneliness in Hopper's work. I like to think of Hopper's work as contemplative solitude in a fast-paced, ever-changing world in which individuals often do feel detached or alienated. Hopper once said that great art is the outward expression of an inner life. And even when he insisted that he represented only himself, his canvases read like field notes on the 20th century American condition. Urban growth, technological speed, and humans feeling less and less connection with the rapidly changing world around them. If you feel hurried by the world, Hopper invites you to step back, sit with the hush in between actions, and feel time expand. Just slow down. Edward Hopper was born in 1882 and grew up in Nyack, New York. He trained as an illustrator in New York, and he spent time in Paris in the early 1900s. He then settled in Greenwich Village, New York, with his wife, the artist Josephine de Hopper. His works are viewed as prime examples of American realism, focused on the contemporary world around him with psychological depth and always narrative ambiguity. He painted slowly and sparingly, working from on-the-spot sketches and memories to distill scenes that feel at once ordinary and theatrical. His subjects are the spaces of modern life, streets, diners, hotel rooms, and theaters. They are emptied out just enough that the remaining details hum with implication. I like to say that Hopper is a great storyteller in that he provides a great prompt, but then he allows the viewer to create the story. Hopper isn't interested in painting crowds. He isolates a figure, a facade, a slice of light, and he lets the environment do the storytelling. While training and traveling in Europe, Hopper absorbed the old masters, not as decoration, but as method. I most often think of Johannes Vermeer's works when I look at Hopper. The poised quiet, the lucid light, the air around a figure made palpable. Vermeer's young women standing at the windows, half lost in thought, are ancestors to Hopper's readers, ushers, and solitary diners. The resemblance is more than a visual rhyme. It's an ethic of attention. Vermeer builds time with light, and so does Hopper. But Hopper anchors his stillness in modern places: diners, automats, train cars, theaters, hotel rooms, places where strangers share space without sharing lives. The result is a new kind of Dutch interior, remade for an electrified 20th century city. In paintings like Room in New York or Night Windows, We play the role Vermeer often gives us, the discreet onlooker, peering in from a threshold, reading the light for cues, and discovering that quiet is not emptiness, but presence. Like Vermeer's paintings, Hopper provides a sense of voyeurism, looking briefly into a world we're not meant to see. Perhaps his most well-known work is Nighthawks. Nighthawks distills urban solitude into a luminous late-night tableau. Through a plate glass window, we observe three patrons and a white-coated counterman in a sharply angled diner, their figures isolated by silence and light. The fluorescent glow floods the counter and polished surfaces, but the surrounding street remains empty, its storefronts dark, the corner oddly doorless. Hopper's pared-down geometry, the sweeping curve of the glass, the triangular counter, all guides the eye while withholding any clear narrative. The man and woman don't touch. The lone man faces away. The server looks past them. Outside, the city is all facade, with no entry to the diner, a stage without exits. Painted during World War II and now housed at the Art Institute of Chicago, the scene captures an American mood of vigilance, insomnia, and estrangement. Yet its stillness is compassionate too, a quiet fellowship of strangers holding on to warmth and routine. Now, when we talk of Nighthawks, one of the best ways to enter into it is through literature. Years before he painted Nighthawks, Hopper read Ernest Hemingway's short story, The Killers, a taut little masterpiece set in a cheap Midwestern diner. Hopper was so taken with the story that he sent a letter to the publishers complimenting the story. Ernest Hemingway's sentences are famously lean. They lay down facts like planks across a dark river, and you feel the current of dread in his language running beneath. Hopper's canvas works in a similar way. He strips the street of traffic and most signage, subtracts the door that would let us walk in, and leaves four figures lit like specimens under glass. Let your eyes adjust just to the geometry, the glass curve of the diner, the hard angles of the counter, the deep green exterior. Hopper funneled us toward a handful of figures under intense artificial light, while the street outside is emptied of cars and pedestrians. Fluorescent lighting, newly common in the early 1940s, casts that aquarium glow and turns the scene into urban still life. He even removed any visible entrance, sealing us outside and them inside the glass case. In the painting, nothing happens, yet the air is charged with implication, proximity without connection. Safety is lighted by the fluorescent lights, and it makes the faces both look present and far away. What Hemingway did with pared-down prose, Hopper does with pared-down form. We too become silent witnesses stationed outside the glass, measuring a modern solitude that needs no melodrama to be felt. If this scene took place today, the woman's downward glance might fall not to a slip of paper, but easily to the glow of an iPhone. Because Hopper is our poet of intermissions, it makes sense that he loved the movies. Hopper's New York movie splits the theater in two. On the left, a distant audience sits, their backs to us, beneath the glow of a movie screen. On the right, an usherette stands alone near a velvet-draped doorway, head bowed, lost in thought. Sconces pour warm light down paneled columns, carving the space into vertical bands. Plush seats, carpeted aisles, and the sweeping curve of the balcony suggest the luxe dreams of movie palaces of the early 20th century. Yet the woman's inwardness quiets the spectacle. The usher becomes the painting's true protagonist, embodying the interval between scenes when attention drifts and time loosens. New York Movie stages two tempos in one room. On the left, the audience shares time with the projector. On the right, an usherette, half in shadow, keeps her own time under a lamp. Hopper's composition, cropped like a film image, sightlines broken by red curtain, owes something to Vermeer's frequently curtained voyeurism and his inwardly focused women. You can almost see Vermeer's girl reading a letter at an open window in the usher's bowed posture, attention turned inward. This is Hopper's great subject, not crowds or crises, but the discrepancy between public time and private time, between the hive's clock and a person's pulse. If New York Movie shows how we drift inside a crowd, Automat shows us how we settle into solitude inside a machine built for speed. In the 20s and 30s, the Automat was the modern fast food cafeteria. Coin slots and chrome, urban efficiency incarnate. Hopper seats a woman alone beneath receding ceiling lights, reflected in a dark window, turning the night into a mirror. The Automat, a cafeteria where food came from coin-operated windows, was the perfect modern setting for speedy meals and solitary breaks. Hopper positions us at another table. Note the cropped chair back at the lower right, as if we're sharing the room, yet we're kept at a respectful distance. The painting turns a mass production dining room into a meditation on attention and interiority in the city. Hopper's Automat presents a solitary woman paused at a small marble-topped table. Cloche hat low, a cup of coffee warming her hands, one hand still gloved. Ceiling lights blaze overhead and bounce in the plate glass window behind her as a cascade of receding white orbs. Yet the street beyond reads as impenetrable blackness. Hopper's composition places her slightly off-center, elbows tight, gaze dropped toward the coffee, suspended between motion and decision, deep in thought. The room's clinical brightness isolates rather than invites. It suggests the anonymity of modern mechanized dining. Time feels stalled. Is it post-theater? Is it after work? Between connections? All of this is while the city hums elsewhere. Without narrative resolution, the painting holds us in her hush, turning an everyday pause into a quietly monumental meditation of urban solitude. Hopper gives you clues, but withholds the script. He once shrugged that he was unconsciously painting the loneliness of a big city. His real subject, he knew, was the inner life that escapes slogans. He joked, if you could say it in words, there would be no reason to paint. For Hopper, the silence is not a lack of action, but a signal. When noise stops, we notice how much of life is made of looking, waiting, and thinking. Even Hopper's exteriors can feel like interiors, because he builds them out of thresholds and frames. And his works that are urban landscapes or solitary buildings are as intriguing and full of life as those populated by figures. Early Sunday morning is a facade at rest. Empty windows, a barber pole, shadows like sundials. The block breathes before the day begins, but one wonders, What's going on in those empty windows? It's not abandoned. It's quiet, but vibrant. In Hopper's work, the architecture matters almost as much as the people, sometimes more, and sometimes it's the only focus. House by the Railroad is an example. It plants a Victorian house beside the hard stripe of a railroad track, and you can feel modernity passing with its back turned to the old house, as if time itself were a train that never quite stops. Filmmaker Alfred Hitchcock later borrowed that mood and that image for the Bates house in his 1960 classic, Psycho. Hopper's stillness is magnetic to storytellers, especially filmmakers. Cinema loves his rooms and sidewalks because they suggest a story while refusing to complete it. Hopper is, in that sense, America's great director of the moment before. In fact, the intersection of Hopper's voyeuristic paintings and film is most vivid in Hitchcock's 1954 film, Rear Window, which shared themes of urban isolation and the voyeuristic act of observing private lives from a distance through windows that creates a sense of mystery and suspense. Hopper's focus on what is excluded, combined with his ability to evoke a narrative within solitary scenes, was directly transcribed into Hitchcock's cinematic masterpiece, making the paintings a visual and conceptual foundation for the film's tension and atmosphere. So, what does all this teach us about a rapidly moving urban world? First, that slowness can be found inside fast systems if we know where to look, like in window light raking across a table, in the brief vacancy of a street at daybreak, in the secular chapels of places like diners and theaters, where strangers shelter together without obligation. Second, that solitude is not the same as sorrow. Many of Hopper's figures are not downcast. They are inward. They're thinking. Their apartness can ache, it's true, but it can also guard a space for reflection in a culture that confuses noise for vitality and importance. Third, that our glass box life, the co-working loft, the late-night cafe, the rideshare at 2 a.m., fulfills Hopper's prophecy that modern light would render us visible, but not necessarily connected. We recognize his compositions in our own routines because the infrastructures have changed less than we imagine. The diner's counter becomes a bar of laptops. The usher's alcove becomes a young sales clerk checking her phone between customers. The automat easily becomes a Starbucks. Hopper doesn't lament loneliness. He dignifies it. One of the great lessons to take away from Hopper's work is that it's okay to be alone. He subtracts advertising and the bustle of the city until the city's human tempo is legible again. Vermeer lends him the ethics of patient seeing. Hemingway lends him the courage to say only what is necessary and let implication do the rest. That combination, luminous attention and disciplined understatement, is why his images persist. Stand outside Nighthawks a moment longer, and you'll feel the painting do what few lectures can. It slows you down enough to notice that you're breathing. Thanks for watching. Until next time, safe journeys.